A very good morning to all of you here. Uh, I'm Karan Mulchandani, and I'm the founder of Enlightened Sapiens. And welcome to yet another Enlightened Weekend, where we hold sessions free of cost, like today, on various topics from art, gardening, meditation, fitness, you name it. And the reason why we do these sessions free of cost is because we want you all to discover your passion. So these weekends we use, of course, to unwind, relax, have fun, but also to learn, right? Learn something that makes you happy. And that is the essence of Enlightened Sapiens. We are a community, all of us together, a community that encourages each other to grow and learn with the things that we love, so that when we're ready, we can give back with this knowledge, making it easier for someone else to do the same. Sort of like a conscious society, as I keep saying, where we are happy looking and seeing other people happy and grow, right? And we are standing on each other's shoulders to help someone else grow. And today we have one of our community members, Kavya Sharma, who wishes to give back with her knowledge on writing and writing poetry in general. So a little bit about Kavya. She is a poet, an author, and an editor. She is also the founder of and editor-chief of a literary digital magazine known as Verse of Silence. She loves writing at night, and today she is going to help us with writing poetry. So it's many of you may know, because we are here for a poetry session, that April is National Poetry Writing Month. So we thought of having this session where we wanted to get the poet in each of you out, right? Because I feel it's very important to be able to express yourself, and poetry is a beautiful medium to do that, where we'll be able to express whatever emotions we're going through. And especially what Kavya is going to teach us today and take us through today is a form of poetry known as free verse, where it's does not have the limitations of needing to rhyme. Those of you who've attended our sessions before, we've held sessions on journaling, on vision boards, and basically maintaining a book, right? And I think it's important. When I go through my book and we were having this session, I was wondering, do I write poetry? Because I always thought that poetry is needed to rhyme. So it really doesn't. And it's all about putting that pen to paper. All you need is a book and paper. Any book, any paper is fine. Any pen is fine. Of course, hope you all enjoy today. It's interactive, as all our sessions are. Use the chat box for relevant questions only, so that Kavya can take them. And of course, use the raise hand button, like Om has done right now, when we are interacting and we're taking questions. So yes, excited for today. I hope you'll all write poetry with us together today. And I'm going to share details of how you all can share your poetry with us. We've always promoted writing. We have a blog which we call Thoughts on our website. So that we'll get to later. But for now, be in the present. You have 1 hour with Kavya, and hope you'll all enjoy. Over to you, Kavya.
Hi everyone. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. I'm really delighted to be here with all of you and to discuss whatever knowledge I've gained in my years of working on poetry and fiction both. Because as someone who works in the publishing industry and in the creative industry, I feel every form of writing goes hand in hand. So before I begin, I like to do that in all my workshops. Please take care. COVID is getting scarier now. So just please stay at your homes and leave only if it is really necessary. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. All right. With this, I'd like to start. So today it's about poetry, and I deliberately chose the topic of free verse poetry. Now, just to get a good idea, how many of you already write poetry? Can you just raise your hands? Or just do the signal that there is. Yeah, how many of you already write poetry? Okay, lovely. Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, and how many of you think that you don't write poetry that well? Yeah, like you're not confident about writing poetry. Can you raise your hands now? Okay, all right. Okay, so It's fair enough. All right. I think as writers, or anyone who's in the creative field, it is something very inherent to us, that we tend to be overcritical of our own works, whether it's a musician, whether it's a painter, whether it's a writer, or even if it's a chef. So I'm going to give you a lot of tips here and there, whatever is coming to my mind. The first pro tip to be a good writer, whether you're writing fiction or whether you're attempting poetry or any other sort of creative writing, do not be overcritical of your writings. Until and unless you learn to fall in love with your own work, you cannot expect others to fall in love with it, right? If you're not confident about your writings on your own, you cannot expect your readers to like it, because that confidence will not reflect through your art otherwise, right? That confidence, that love, that passion will only reflect through your work if you put yourself into it. And once you've written it, once you've edited it, you've given it the best version of yourself, just let it be. Then it is up to the readers. Second tip that I'll give you before I actually start is, uh, whatever you write, okay, it is not meant for everyone. And especially with poetry, the audience is very niche and very limited. Okay, so a very famous Indian author said that in India we are struggling from a phase where we have more writers than readers. So the Indian readership is very limited. But whatever limited Indian readership we have, they're like ardent readers. They're good readers who will come back to your work again and again if you diligently provide it to them, right? So focus only on your niche audience, only on people who actually value art. If you try to impress people who are just genuinely not into it, and are maybe into more of a massy content, you will never feel happy about your own work. Okay, so just be clear on these aspects. Now, poetry. What is actually poetry? So a lot of people are like, okay, we write poetry, but what actually is poetry? Poetry, in put in very simple terms, is aesthetically presenting your emotions. Okay, so the basic difference between fiction, and when I mean fiction, I mean novel, whether it's a romance novel, whether it's a mythology, whether it's a crime fiction novel, and poetry, is that with novel you have to be logical enough. The events happen in a logical manner. Okay, there is a timeline to events, there is a storyline to it. With poetry, you can make sense and yet you can be as illogical as you want, because the focus is more on expressing your emotions as in how they are coming, just beautifying them through various poetic tools, which we are going to talk about today. Okay, so poetry is basically beautifying your emotions, aesthetically presenting your expressions and emotions in a written format. That is poetry. And you don't have to worry about giving it a storyline, about making sense. Even in fantasy fictions like the Harry Potter, like, there is some sort of logic in it. Like, even if things are happening, there is some sort of logic in it. But with poetry, there is no such rule. Okay, the main focus is expressing yourself, right? Now the second thing is, why do you want to write poetry? What is the intention behind writing poetry? What is your personal reason behind writing poetry? Now you need to understand that whatever form of art you're coming up with, there has to be some back intention. You might not realize it right now, but there is some intention or the other behind which you're writing any piece. Now I have a set of things. I'm just going to copy paste in the chat box. The question is, why do you want to write poetry? Because you're passionate about it, which is the most common answer that I usually get. Okay. Secondly, because you like reading poetry, so you want to try your hand at it. Okay. People like experimenting. Because you want to spread a message through your poems. Personally, this is something that I've come to now. Okay. So when I started writing poetry, it was more about trying my hand at poetry. Then it changed to I am passionate about it, and now it has changed. My reason has changed to because I want to spread across a message through my writings. Even if I can impact one person through my writings, that's good enough for me. Okay, and right, okay, I'm getting quite a few good answers here, and the last one is because they are the easiest way to express yourself. Okay, some people find it easy to express themselves through poetry, some people find it easy to express themselves through micro tales, through quotes, through fiction, through short stories, through flash fiction. There are so many forms of writing, right? So okay, popularity, feelings. It provides you peace of mind, friends, girls. Okay, feels good. All right, good reasons here. Now, just another myth that I'd like to bust. A lot of people start writing because they want to get famous, because they want to get popular. I've been in the field for like 5 years now, for close to 5 years, and I'll tell you, if you want to get famous, getting famous through poetry is the most difficult way to get famous. So maybe change your course of path, because it's not easy. There are anyway very few readers, very limited number of readers who will appreciate your art, and they will only get to know your art if you're regular enough with it. If you think you write now and then for the next 3-4 months you're incognito, you're gone, you're not writing, you're not sharing your poetry pieces, the audience will not remember you, they will not stick around. Okay, so before you actually start your poetry journey, it is important that you grow your limited audience that there is. It is important to grow that audience, because people need to trust your writings, people need to trust you as an artist, and that can only happen if you're regular with them. Okay, now that we have discussed what poetry is and what is your intention behind writing poetry, let's come to free verse. So poetry has been going on since time immemorial. People started expressing themselves through different ways. When poetry started, it started as a very rigid form of expression. Okay, with sonnets, with limericks, with haikus. These are all very rigid forms of writing poetry because they were written in the pre-modern era. Okay, when poets focused more on the structure of poetry rather than the content of it, rather than the expression of it. Okay, but now we live in a post-colonial era. We live in a post-modern era wherein, just like we are free of any traditions, rituals, inhibitions, our style of expressing ourselves, our style of writing poetry is also free of any rigidity and any rules. And that is where free verse comes into picture. So just to give you a little idea, what is post-colonial? Post-colonial is that we all come from an era where our forefathers were ruled by the Britishers. Okay, so our mindset runs in that manner. How many of you agree that? How many of you agree that most of us are bilingual here? Just raise your hands. Most of us are bilingual, either Hindi English or Bengali English or Kannada English or Marathi English. We're all bilingual, right? Yes, so that's the basic trend of being a post-colonial generation. Now, being bilingual is reflected in our writings. Okay, whenever we write, now, are there certain words that you prefer writing in your mother tongue? If yes, just raise your hands up. Yes. I would say a lot of people tend to avoid that, thinking, oh no, we are writing a poetry in English. We should avoid writing, taking, a Bengali word or a Hindi word or a Urdu word or whatever. Don't do that. Just remember that that is actually your strength. Use it to your advantage. There are certain words that you should be using in your mother tongue because they make more sense, because they bring out a better impact, because they kind of make your reader feel like, wow, okay, this was nice. Okay, so use it to your strength. Don't fear mentioning a few words in your mother tongue. Okay, so coming from a post-colonial era, we write in a very bilingual way. We write in English, or we write in a way where we mix two languages. Initially, a lot of poets tended to avoid that. I would say, again, use it to your strength. Now, coming to free verse. Free verse is a style of poetry which today's generation poets use, because you don't need to rhyme your poems in free verse. You don't need to focus on how many lines you have to write. You don't have to focus on how many stanzas there have to be. You don't have to follow any rhyming scheme. If it doesn't have any poetic tool, that is also fine. So basically, free verse is a style of poetry that you can create in your own manner. Okay, you can customize your poetry in your own manner. So many people write free verse poetry in different formats, and yet all of those poems look, sound, and appear different. When I say appear, I mean in written format, the structure is different from each other. Okay, now, can you guys mention one poet you really enjoy reading in the chat box? You can mention an Instagram poet, or a famous poet, or someone who is dead now. Just mention your favorite poets in the chat box. Okay. Rupi Kaur, Robert Frost, Rumi, okay, Keats, lovely, Coleridge, William Wordsworth, Sarojini Naidu, lovely, Charles Roski, okay, Shakespeare, Robert Frost. Robert Frost is amazing. Lovely. Yes. Take inspiration from all the names that you've written. Okay. Now, the first step to being a good writer, any sort of writer, is being a good reader. If your reading scope is very limited, you can only come up with limited amount of content. Okay, so until and unless you're a good reader, you can never be a good writer. You will have stuff, you can write stuff, but then there will come a point where you've reached your saturation point. Okay, and then no new ideas will be coming. Even if new ideas are coming, they will not be good enough because you have limited your horizon as a writer. When you read other artists' work, when you appreciate other artists' work and take away the good things out of it, you try to implement them in your own style. Okay, now another thing that I'd like to tell you, there is nothing that has not been written yet in fiction. When it comes to fiction, everything has been written. Every sort of crime thriller, every sort of mythology, every sort of romance fiction, there is nothing that has not been written till now. Then why are people still writing and why are people still reading? That's because each one of us have a very individualistic style of writing. That is what differentiates you from me and you from each other. Okay, so even if you present same kind of content, how will it be different from the other? Because your style of writing is different. I might look at the moon from one perspective and you might look at the moon from the other perspective. That's the whole game of it. Okay, so remember to strengthen your individual style of writing, to firstly discover your individual style of writing and then strengthening it in your own way. Okay, now coming to tools of poetry writing, I'm going to type in the chat box and I request you all to stop typing in the chat box for some time so that the points don't get lost here. Okay, so I'll just type them down and then I'm going to discuss these. I've mentioned 10 very commonly used and basic steps to writing poetry. There are tons of more other tools that you can use in poetry, but those are more advanced forms of poetry writing. So I'm just going to cover the basics here so that you can make a quick start to it. Now, first one is metaphor. What are metaphors? Can anyone tell me? You can just raise your hand. Yes, Devesh. Can someone unmute and
Go ahead, Monica. You can unmute yourself.
yes, Monica, go ahead.
Hi, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying that metaphors are basically sentences or words you basically use as a form of symbolism to define a particular thing.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Can we have one more person? Any random person would like to
Ankita,
go ahead.
Yes, sir.
go ahead.
Sir, can I speak in Hindi?
You can, but because the majority of audience will understand English, would it be fine?
Okay, no issue.
Yeah.
Basically, metaphors are basically those phrases which are used, like in Hindi, if we can say, they are muhavre. Basically, those which says a lot of thing in just a few words, like sixes and sevens, not a cup of tea, or something like that.
Right. Okay. Good. Good examples. All right. Metaphors are basically figures of speech in which you are connecting two things. So you write one thing and mean the other. Okay. Now I'll give you an example. For example, if I say metaphors, your cherry face. Now how? But if you look at it logically, your cherry face doesn't make sense. But then here the poet is using cherry as a word to define how red is the girl's face, how blushy red beautiful is the girl's face. So your cherry face, so you are using one word, you're using the word cherry, but you're meaning something else, you're meaning beautiful. Okay. Another example would be, I am drowning in sea of grief. There is no sea of grief, I mean not literally, but then the poet is using the sea and the vastness of the sea to define how grief is the pain, how deep is the pain. Okay. So this is metaphors. This is how you use metaphors in your poem, when you write one word and you intend to mean something else. Okay. Can any one of you quickly think of another metaphor example and give me? You can just raise your hand and someone from the team can take it.
Ami, go ahead.
Yes, sir. My mother is nectar from heaven to me, so the nectar from heaven, like that.
Yes, very good example. Lovely. Anyone else?
Amaldas or Devina?
Hello.
Yes, hi, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My example was as cool as a cucumber.
Okay, no. So now what you've given an example of is simile. That is not metaphor, because you've written as this, as that. Okay. Okay, that brings me to a metaphor, like simile. I'll now continue.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's okay. People are often confused between metaphors and simile. Now, the basic difference between metaphors and simile is that in metaphors, you are directly using the word, another word to intend something else. Okay. While when you're using similes, you say as beautiful as the moon or as red as the cherry. So you are using words like as and like. So while in metaphors, there is an indirect comparison because you're using one word and intending another. In similes, you bring out a direct comparison between two things. Okay. For example, she was asked as fast as the bee, So there is a direct comparison by writing as fast as the bee. She spoke like a monkey, So that's a direct comparison. Okay. This is the basic difference between metaphors and similes. And these are two most commonly poetic tools used in poetry, in any form of poetry, but majorly in free verse, because in other forms of poetry, things get a little rigid. Okay. So, are we clear with metaphors and similes? Can you give me a thumbs up if you understand metaphors and similes better? Perfect. Don't worry, even if you have questions, we'll take it up in the last. So don't worry about that. You can just note down the questions that you have in your diary and notepads so that you can ask them on later. Okay. All right. So I've given you examples of metaphor and of simile. Now coming to rhyme. Okay. It's the biggest myth that you cannot write a poetry unless and until it is rhyming. No. Poems are not supposed to rhyme. I mean, not in general. If you want to write a rhyming poem, go ahead, do it. That's not a problem. But there is no such rule that it would not be called a poetry if it is not rhyming. That rhyme was started for children's poems. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Why? Because so that children could memorize those poems, so that could stick in their heads. Because when you use rhymes in your poetry, they have a very sing-the-song like quality, they have a very flowy kind of sense and tone to it. And that was why in children's poems, a lot of rhyming was used. Johnny, Johnny, yes, Papa, eating sugar, no, Papa. So that's a rhyme. All right. But as in when you grow up and you realize that there are so many styles of poetry writing, you also understand that poems are not genuinely supposed to rhyme. You can write a poem which is not rhyming and it would still be called a poem. Okay. So rhymes, the most basic form of rhyme is when the last word of your first line rhymes the last word of your third line, and when the last word of your second line rhymes the last word of your fourth line. So that sort of rhyming scheme is called ABAB. So your lines first and third are rhyming, and lines second and fourth are rhyming. I'll just copy paste an example here so that you understand this better. Just give me a second. Okay. I've shared two examples here. The first poem is by Alfred Tennyson called The Brook. So if I read it, I come from the haunts of coot and hern, I make a sudden sally, and sparkle out among the fern to bicker down a valley. So do you see the first word, the last word of the first line hern is rhyming with the last word of the third line fern. So hern and fern are rhyming. And the last word of the second line, sally, is rhyming with the last word of the fourth line, valley. So that's a rhyming scheme which is called ABAB. This is the most commonly used form of rhyming scheme because this is the easiest. There are many other forms of rhyming schemes which become tougher and tougher as you attempt them. Like if you personally ask me, I just absolutely hate attempting rhymes because they are very irritating. It is very irritating to rhyme words. You deliberately have to write certain words which you don't want to just because you have to rhyme your poem. So it's not necessary that you have to rhyme, but it is still a poetic tool that you can use to your advantage if you want to in your poetry pieces. Okay. Coming to the second example, tribute to mother poem. The one who brought me down to earth and held me every day, the one who gracefully gave me birth and said, I love you in every way. So earth and birth is rhyming, right? And day and way is rhyming. This is the most common example I can give you, the most basic example of how rhyme is used in your poetry. So with this, we're done with metaphors, simile, and rhyme. Three poetic styles. All right. Now, all right, just give me a second. Okay, coming to alliteration. What is alliteration? Alliteration is when you write similar sounding words close to each other so that they are not actually rhymes, but then you're creating a sound as if your words are sounding same. Okay, like I'll give you an example. Sweet bird sang. Sweet bird sang. So sir, S and S. So when you place words which start with the same alphabet and have a same sound close to each other, very close to each other, uh, they sound as if they are rhyming and as if you're speaking in a similar sound of tone. Another example would be listen to my lilac lore. La. Listen to my lilac lore. Okay. Okay. Now I'll copy paste a poem here. This is a poem that is written by me. So I did my master's in creative writing from University of Nottingham, and there we were given a lot of difficult tasks. So one of my professors, you should also search him out. His name is John McGregor, and he's a Man Booker Prize long-listed, shortlisted British author. He was my professor there. So he gave us a task that we have to write a poem which is full of alliteration. Every line should have alliteration in it. Okay, very difficult to write. But then I wrote a poem and I'll share it here. It's a very fun poem to read, and you should also try an experiment like this just to get an idea how things will feel. Give me a second. I'll just copy paste the poem here. Oh. Would it be better if I share the screen because I think the poem would be long, so it might not get copy pasted in one go.
Sure.
All right. So I think I'll just share the screen. Can we all see? Just give me a thumbs up. All right. So this one is called vegan woes. Okay, so just to give you a heads up, this is about a girl who's a vegan and she's trying to fight her father about, you know, eating non-veg basically. So I'll just read it out so that you get an idea. Or I would actually prefer if someone else reads it. Would anyone like to read this piece? I'll keep on sliding it down and read it fast because it's a very fast-paced poem. You can take any random name, please, and that person can read.
Sukriti, would you like to read?
Yes, sir.
Right.
It was a stench of some sort. I swallowed my staged saliva, stuck of stubborn swedging, bubbling with my bombastic beer, open board bazoo, bringing in fate billetness, the one I threw threshing towards a theatre artist. Tasteless, tuna tethering, betwixt my mushy mouth mingling with misery mango taste. Last Monday, I remember, relishing it with rotten Rogan Roche, regretted Rathan recently. I am an amaged vegan against the ambushed antagonism of my ancestors. Half wolf, half human, hiding hither with unattended howling hushes. Father frowned, saying, Palguni, you are far from being foreign. Learning the lesson, unlearned I language in my language, a mundane mix of matra basha and colonized maturity, divided in roots,
Yeah.
disparate distraction, disregarded calling for closure. A Jingosm cried cross-checking withdrawal I led to where do I belong, analyzing the analogy of undone affinity.
Just a second. I'll just slide it down. Yeah.
I knew knowledge was unnerving, yet I yearned for practiced analogy, to trace my untrained tradition and inherent identity, evolving elsewhere.
Yes, thank you so much. So if you notice, the last line has EE, the second last has II, inherent identity. The third last has TT, trace, traditions. Okay. Coming to, just give me a second. Coming to the first line, it was a stench of some sort. I swallowed my stagnant saliva, stuck of stubborn swedging. So do you notice it's majorly all S's? Yes. In the second line, it's bubbling within my bombastic, bare open board bazoo, bringing in faint belatedness. It's all B, right? So the similar sounding words. So this is what alliteration is. And if you also notice, coming to structure of poetry, which is another poetic tool that you have to use, do you notice that the poem is going in this format? First sentence is longest, then there is a shorter sentence, then shorter, and in the last, there are only two words in the last line. So the poem goes from long to short, and then just to two words. Okay, so this is a structure of writing poetry wherein you can either just give me a second, I'll just stop sharing the screen. Yeah, so this is a structure of poetry wherein you can write your poems either in stanza format. For example, you have 4 lines, then you leave a gap, then you have 4 lines, then you leave a gap, then you have 4 lines. So that's writing a poem in stanza format. Then there is a couplet format. Couplet means 2 lines. So 2 lines, then you leave a space, then 2 lines, then you leave a space, then 2 lines, then you leave a space. Okay. And then there is this sort of structure, the poem that I just shared, wherein there is a long line, then short, then short, then short, and then short, and then in the last line, maybe just one word is left. Okay, so these are different structures in which you can attempt your poetry, you know, because it is one thing to read out a poetry out aloud, but then there will be places where you might want to submit your poetry, maybe to a literary magazine or maybe to an anthology. So one thing that they really notice is how is the poem structured? How does the poem look like on paper? You know, what is the presentation of it? So that is also important thing that you have to take care of. All right, are we all clear with alliteration? If yes, just give me a thumbs up. We'll take up the doubts, don't worry, we'll take up the doubts in the last. Just note your doubts down. Okay, lovely. Coming to the next, that is repetition. So repetition is another common form of poetic tool that is used in poetry. Repetition, simple. A lot of people understand what repetition means. It means repeating the same word again and again. Okay. And why do you do that? When you want to stress on an emotion. Okay. I looked at you again and again, and you did not turn back. So I looked at you 2 times, again and again, 2 times. So this is a style of poetry. For example, another poetry line that I would like to read is, you turned around and did not see me rather, but you turned around and finally saw me rather. Okay, so turned around. I'm repeating the same words again and again. Why? Because I want to stress on that word. I want to stress on that emotion. So if you're writing a piece of poetry and if you want to stress on something really hard, then you can use the technique of repetition. You can use the words again and again to stress on certain things. All right. So that is repetition, pretty simple. Details, whether personal or fiction. Now, this is something which is usually fought upon amongst in the literary industry that we are a part of. Whenever you write any sort of poetry, should you include yourself in it? What would be your opinion? Can you guys tell me, should you include yourself in it? Should your poems be personal or should you completely fictionalize them? Just type it down in the chat box. You should include yourself, write yes, or no, then write no. Okay. Getting a lot of yeses here. Depends. All right. Okay. Lovely. All right. So when I say include yourself, I mean put in a part of yourself in your pieces. Is that important? Yes. If you want to make any form of writing or music or food or whatever creative thing that you're doing personalized, you have to include yourself in it. There is altogether a different genre of writing which is called as confessional poetry, wherein people write poems which are full of confessions, personal confessions. And the trend started out with poets like Sylvia Plath and Emily Dickinson. How many of you know Sylvia Plath? Just raise your hands. Yes. See how famous she is? She is famous because she made the confessional style of poetry writing famous, and that's how confessionalism came into place. And then it became such a common practice that every time you start with a creative piece, whether poetry or fiction, and if you can include little bit of yourself, I'm not saying make all your poems personal and about yourself, no, but then little details that can make the reader relate to your poem, because that's a very personal thing. It can bring about a different impact in your poetry. So that covers two of my points, which is self and then detailing. How do you add details to your poems? You add details when you compare. For example, if you're writing a poetry on a childhood memory, okay, so you say, you had a childhood umbrella that you were really that you really liked, and you would carry it around. So you have a character here. There is this person that is you who really likes this umbrella. Okay, so you define the umbrella, you define yourself, you define how did you, like, what proves that you were so passionate about that umbrella, you carried it everywhere around. Okay, so these are the details that you have to mention in your poetry. There is a style of poetry where you create stories in your poetry. Okay, so if nothing is coming to your mind and you still want to write a poetry, create a little story around your own personal emotions, your own personal memories, and fictionalize them. What is fictionalizing? Like giving it fictional details which are not true, so that people don't really get to know that this is actually your story. So a lot of authors, a lot of poets do this. They actually write down their stories but fictionalize them just so that the readers don't get to know that they are their stories. Okay, so you can provide in details there. Now, we're done with detailing, we are done with self, and we are done with rhyme, simile, repetition, and metaphors. Coming to line gaps, which is also a part of structure. How do you structure your poem? How do you provide line gaps? Now, I am going to share 3 pieces of poetry here. Okay, all 3 of them are free verse poetry, but they have different structures and different line gaps. Okay, so this will give you a clue of how you can write different styles of poetry through different structures. Okay, just give me a second. I'll share it one by one. So this is one style. I would like someone to read it out. Sick Bed by Rochelle Potker. You can just take a random name.
Smriti, you like to go?
Yeah, sure. Just can you share your screen? I'm not able to find the complete.
Okay, perfect. I'll just do that. Give me a second. Just give me a second.
Sure.
Okay, here you go.
Sick Bed, poem by Rochelle Potker. Not remembering sleep or the winter of her skin, she dozes and wakes, taking away your burning with the single most thought of salt water towels on your back and forehead, like a long distance map laid out of a hypnotic train journey. You lucidly remember an ancient time machine from a comic book, a video game, swallowing the bitter pill of a full moon, the weight of prickly heat stars, swollen universes, summer falling and rising through your body. Brewing sweat, you both are crossing the river of the night, the slow boiling of time through her torn eyes, peeling away the mercury of your ochre skin. The morning melts on its faint blue ledge as she pushes a sunrise egg down her throat so she can go on for day two of mother's marathon against a virus. As you inhale stale eau de cologne off your shirt in the bird cage of your frail body.
Thank you so much. Very beautifully read. So this is called Sick Bed. Do you see the structure here? There is no particular structure actually. It's a free verse poetry. So the first stanza has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, right? The second stanza has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. The third stanza has 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. So it is going from 6, 5, 4. But then you would imagine that, okay, the next line would have 3 lines, but then it doesn't. It still has 4 lines. And then the last one has 2 lines. So the poet hasn't really followed any rigid structure of writing poetry here. Okay. She wrote whatever came to her mind in whichever way. And this poem has so many details. When I mean details, it means read the second paragraph. From a comic book to a video game, swallowing the bitter pill of full moon. Now, bitter pill of full moon, what is this? It's a metaphor. And what is comic book, video game, falling and rising through your body? These are all details, okay? And then summer falling and rising through your body. This is metaphor. Weight of prickly heat stars, swollen universes. Are universes actually swollen? No, universes are not swollen. But this is a metaphor that the poet has used to define how sick her body is because she's on a sick bed. She's calling her body her whole universe and she's saying it's swollen because she's ill. Okay, so this is how you use metaphors. How beautifully has she written? Brewing sweat. What brews? Coffee is something that we brew. We don't brew sweat. What is brewing sweat? Is it logical? No. If you think of it, it is not logical, but then it is poetic. It sounds beautiful. It is metaphorical. So this is the example. I've given you examples of details here of how metaphors are used here and how structure is so free. You want to use 3 lines in first stanza, 6 lines in the next stanza, do it. You're free to do it. Okay. Now, coming to second type of structure. So this is a poem called How to Cut a Fish by Neetu Das. Neetu Das was actually my professor in English literature. I did my English literature from Delhi University. She was my professor. She's a very famous poet. You can find her books online. So do you see how the structure is different? The first one has gaps and it is divided into different stanza by Rochelle Potker. Yes. But if you come to How to Cut a Fish by Neetu Das, there are no gaps. There are no gaps. It's one line after the other. Can anyone please read this one? You can take a random name, please.
Ashish? Yes, Ashish, you like to read?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ashish.
I'm not a rose. I'm not lily. I'm just a marigold.
No.
No. You have to
Ashish,
read.
the poem on the screen.
All right. Okay. You have to sit properly. Women, like on the floor. Put one foot strongly, gingerly on the base of the blade. Hold the fish with firm hands, head and tail, and swing him quick left, right, left, right. To remove the scales, check beneath the grills, red pans, cut them swift, and then fins here and there, up, down, and tail. Feel that perfect line where the head ends and the body begins. Choose it fine and move slow over the edge. Feel the resistance of white flesh, staring eye, and open fingers until it is done and the head sits isolated with the hole dripping with stuff, and then halve him down his body and pull out the red mess. Make equal pieces, cutting him so that the bones do not disturb afterwards.
Yes, thank you so much. So, do you see this is a poem basically about the process of cutting a fish, but the poet here has presented it in a very poetic manner. For example, strongly, gingerly. You know, what is that even? Does it make sense? Does it sound logical to you? No. But this has been used as a poetic tool. Then you see left, right, left, right. There is no space between the words left, right, left, right. Why? Because the poet wants you to read it fast, left, right, without any space, without any gap. Okay? Because this is the kind of tone that the poet wants to get out. Okay? And then feel the resistance of white flesh staring eye. The eye staring. Whose eye? The fish's eye. Okay, so these are the things that have been used as metaphors here, the structure. And do you notice something unusual about this poem? I'd be really like amazed if you can type in the chat box anything amazing about this poem, anything different. Has anyone written anything in the chat box? No line gap. Okay, that is something that I've already said. No full stop. Okay. The formal language can read upside down. No structure. Okay. Okay. All right. So the unusual thing about that poem was that there was no punctuation in that poem. There was not one comma, not one full stop. There was nothing. It was an open-ended poem. There was no punctuation in the poem at all. Okay, and that is the beauty of that poem. What does that intend? It, when you put a comma, what does the author mean? The author means that the author or the poet wants you to take a break, wants you to read. When you come to that comma, take a pause and then start reading again. When the poet is using a full stop, it means that the poet wants you to stop, for take a longer pause and then continue. But then in that poem by Neetu Das, there was no full stop, there was no comma. What does that mean? It means that the poet wants you to continue the poem altogether in one go and not take any pauses. Okay, so that is what the poet intended. Now you can choose what kind of a poem do you want to write. So with this, we are also done with line gaps. Now coming to the most important aspect which we are discussing is punctuation. Punctuation is very important because that is what decides how is a person supposed to read the poem. Okay, there is a comma, which means a small pause. There is a semicolon, which means a long pause. What is a semicolon? I'll show you. This is a semicolon. Okay, for those of you who don't know, this is a semicolon. Then there is a full stop. Full stop means take a long pause, break, and then continue the poem. Now, another pro tip that I'll give you, whenever you're writing your poems, once you have done writing them, read them out loud to yourself. This will help you understand where you're making punctuation mistakes, where you're making mistakes in the sense that you're not using the right kind of comma, the right kind of pauses. Because if you share your poetry on Instagram, on Facebook, or any other social media platform, you're expecting your readers to read the poetry in their mind. When they read, they will keep in mind the comma, the full stop, the semicolon. So you have to be careful about where you're placing that. Okay. Now, I'll let you know about a very special style of we all know what comma is and what full stop is and what semicolon is, but I'll tell you what ellipsis is today. Does anyone know what ellipsis is? Yes, so Sriram has separately sent me. Yes, these are the 3 dots. The 3 dots are called ellipses. Now, can anyone tell me what ellipsis intends? What does ellipsis mean? Just type it down in the chat box. What does this signify? The 3 dots. Trailing off, okay. Emotions, right? That's one way of putting it. Suspense, continuation, an open mind. Okay. Silence, pause to think, good. Yes. So trailing off is a good way of putting it. When you put the 3 dots in your poems, it means that you were about to write something as a poet, but you chose not to because you're so full of your emotions. So you just leave it be, you put the 3 dots, and then you expect the readers to understand whatever they want to. So you don't spoon feed the reader here. You put the 3 dots because you just don't want to write what you wanted to write. So you take a step back, you put the 3 dots, and you want the reader to interpret it in their own way. Okay, I'll share with you an example of a very famous poem by Kamla Das, which will give you a clue. Just give me a second. Do we all see the screen? Can anyone read Winter by Kamla Das?
Go ahead, Sneha.
Winter by Kamla Das. It smelt of new rains and of tender shoot of plants, and its warmth was the warmth of earth groping for roots. Even my soul, I thought, must send its roots somewhere. And I loved his body without shame. On winter evenings, as cold winds chuckled against the white window panes.
Yes. So this is just a portion of the poetry from Summer in Calcutta. That's a very beautiful book by Kamla Das. You should definitely read Kamla Das. Do you see the use of ellipses after in the 3rd line after roots? There are 3 dots. So here Kamla Das trails off. She wants to write something, but she pauses herself and she puts the 3 dots and she wants you to interpret it in your own way. Now, one person read it in one way. Now I read the same poem in a proper way. Just notice where all the commas are placed and where ellipsis is placed, and now understand how this poem is supposed to be read, how important punctuation is in a poem. Okay. Winter by Kamla Das. It smelled of new rains and of tender shoots of plants, and its warmth was the warmth of earth groping for roots. Even my soul, I thought, must send its roots somewhere, and I loved his body without shame. On winter evenings, as cold winds chuckled against the white window panes. So after every comma, you have to take a pause. Now that might sound like, okay, why is it so important? It is important because the way you punctuate the poem is the way you provide stresses to your poem, is the way you provide those important gaps to your poem, is the way you provide that space to your readers to take a breather, to absorb the poem, to feel it better, to understand it better, and then go ahead. It's all about feel good. It's all about the tone. It's all about the pauses and the breaks, which are very important in poetry. Okay. Uh, yes. So with this, we are done with metaphors, simile, rhyme, alliteration, repetition, details, structure, punctuation, line gaps, ellipses. These are the important, and self, which I already talked about through details. These are the important tools of poetry that you can use in your poetry while writing poetry. Now you need to understand that you don't have to use all these tools in one poem. Okay. You write a piece of poetry, there can be a poetry where you're just using metaphor, or where you're just using simile, or where you're using a mix of rhyme and alliteration. Okay. So you can pick up any 2-3 elements that you like, that you think will fit in that particular piece of poetry, and use it to your advantage. Okay. And honestly, you don't have to be very conscious of using these poetic tools. Sometimes they come so naturally to you that you don't have to make an effort also. And when later on, when you read that poem, you're like, oh wow, I used metaphors in my poem, or I used similes in my poem. So give yourself that chance. Okay. Now, before I take up any questions, I'm just going to give you a little exercise. I want you to take 5 minutes off, okay, and give me just a 3 to 4 line poem, maximum 4 line poem on anything you like. There is no restriction in terms of topic. There is no restriction in terms of how you present it. Write a 4 line free verse poem on anything you want and type it down in the chat box. Just take 2-3 minutes whenever you're ready. Okay, I see quite a few poems coming my way. Just to see your face, I could walk billions of feet because somewhere under the starry sky, you and I are destined to meet. Very beautiful, Rohit. Beautifully put. So I'm just going to read a few that I can see here. Meanwhile, if any one of you have any questions, you can also type them down because then we'll take up the questions after this. I'm just going to read the 4 line poems. Even my soul could have been written in the same line, so why was it broken into the next line? Okay, this is by Melby. Beautiful thought. Lovely, Melby. Okay. Watching you smile is like the sun rising, presenting the present, which is quite surprising. It's like my sadness vanishing. Lovely, Shrishti. Beautifully written. I'm a soldier. I belong to Azad Hind Fauj. I salute Netaji and want to carry forward his calls. Okay. Lovely poems coming my way. In the end, will we hold on to each other or separate our ways and pretend like nothing happened? That is by Ashlisha. Beautiful. Another beautiful one by Arushi. I swayed with the sunflowers, I danced in the rain. I saw the winter take away those lives and the summer give life back again. So beautiful, lovely. Another one that I'm seeing by Honey. Sitting under the starry sky between his arms, I felt warm, staring at the stars and the moon. We felt dreamy, promising each other forever happiness until we knew that forever never exists. Okay, quite a sad ending here. Okay, I'm just going to read 2 more and then we'll take up the doubts. The sky looked like a cotton candy. See, looked like a cotton candy. So this is a simile, right? You're already using similes. The sky looked like a cotton candy. The rocks were moon blenched. Now, this is a metaphor in second line. 4 line poem and you're already using similes and metaphors. The rocks were moon blenched. The palm trees were shady and I felt sun drenched. This is by Atira, beautifully written. Okay. Okay, I'm going to read this one by Deepak Virmani. My darling, one dark night, just the 2 of us. Leave behind this worldly circus. Life's too easy to live. Do not know why people make such a fuss. Just stand by me, nothing to be said and nothing to discuss. Hold my hand and walk beside me. I will show you the entire universe. So many beautiful rhymes here. Circus, fuss, discuss. So do you see the sound that is coming through these rhymes? Beautifully written, Deepak. Lovely submission, you guys. You can make your submissions to the organization who's beautifully organized this workshop. They have a platform. You can share your poems there. And when I mean be confident about your write-ups, whenever you write your poems, feel free to submit it to various platforms. What is the worst thing that can happen? You'll get rejected. So what? Just to give you a heads up, for my first book, which was a poetry book, I'm on my fourth now. I got rejected 27 times. But did I lose hope? No. Everyone gets rejected, and that's a part and parcel of being in the creative industry. There will be some people who will understand your creativity, there will be some who will not. Okay, you constantly grow, you constantly write, you constantly work on it, and you constantly keep on trying. So there are so many beautiful platforms. Enlightened Sapiens is one of them. You can submit your poetry there. Even to Verse of Silence, my organization, you can submit your pieces. And once you start getting published through different platforms, you will also gain confidence about your own writings, and that is very important. All right. Okay. Can we take up the doubts, if any, now?
Sure. Would love to. It was a beautiful session so far, Kavya, honestly. A lot of learning. And as you can see with the participation, a lot of people have written poetry in this short, small little project that you gave us to do. And it was beautiful to hear all the poetry. So, yes, I think Kavya has beautifully explained everything. If you all have any questions, we can take a few right now. I've been reading on the chat box how you like to stay connected, our social handles, and where you can submit your work. We'll share all of that. For now, we just want to see if there's any questions. We'd love to answer them. And we'll share ways which you can ask your questions even after the session.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand, and we'd definitely love to take them. Okay, so let's go with M95 Rights. Go ahead.
Hey, hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Actually, I just written something a few days back. Like wanted a feedback on how can I improve that thing.
Then maybe, in the end, we can even share my email ID or Instagram account, because it would be better. You can share your poetry piece or whatever you've written there, and then I'll get back to you with the feedback, if that works.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have Kavya's Insta handle and ours, so we'll be sharing all those details. So again, if you all would like to share your work, we'll show you all ways. So let's get to Tanveer. Tanveer, do you have a question?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to know about the structure of the poem Vegan Bow. We read that aloud, but I could not understand the structure of the poem.
Would you like to see the structure again, or would you like are you asking me to explain it in some way or the other?
No, we were talking about structures. You told us about different structures that could be used, like stanzas and couplets. So right. I wanted to know what structure Vegan Bow is written in.
So see, when it comes to structure, it's not like structures have been given any specific names per se. Not every structure has been. For example, couplets has been given, like 2 lines, then gap, then 2 lines, then gap. And stanza format has been given, like 4-5 lines, then gap, 4-5 lines, then gap. But the poem Vegan was in a continuation structure wherein there was no line gap. And this is something that I just invented on my own. It's not like it's written somewhere that it has a name to it. But I tried experimenting and came up with it on my own. So there are separate ways in which you can experiment with the structure. But if you ask me, it's just a continuation structure with no line gap.
I was wondering if you write it in a continuation process, wouldn't it be considered as a para instead?
No, it would not be considered a para, because there is a difference between prose poetry and free verse poetry. But I mean, we can take up a session on prose poetry in future if you guys would like. That is what is called as a paragraph poetry, and then I'll be able to explain a difference better between prose poetry and free verse poetry.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, let's quickly take another question. Let's go with Naina.
Ma'am, can you just explain me the difference between personification and metaphor?
Okay, so metaphors is when you connect 2 things, okay, wherein you write one word in your poem and you intend something else. For example, your cherry face. Now, face cannot literally be cherry, right? So cherry has been used as a word to define another thing, which is beauty. Your cherry face. By this, the poet means that her face is red because cherries are red, right? So you're using the word cherry directly and not writing the word red, because cherry sounds more poetic if you put it in poetry. So you're trying to beautify your poetry piece. That is metaphor. Okay, you use one word instead of directly using another word and intend something else. These are metaphors. Personification is when you try to make something so elaborate, when you try to personify it to an extent that, again, not much of a difference between metaphors and personification, and actually even similes. These three things run around the same concept, that you write something else but you mean something else, you exaggerate something. So personification is about exaggerating. Okay, as simple as that. I hope that helps.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, let's go with one last question. We're going to get you all your questions answered. Don't worry. We'll show you all how you can stay connected with Kavya and Enlightened Sapiens. But let's, for the factor of time, let's, Raghav, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah. Hello, Kavya. Actually, I have a doubt. Like, how can we deal with a writer's block?
Honestly, Raghav, if you personally ask me, for me, writer's block is just a fear where people fear writing bad. There comes a time when you feel like, okay, I'm not inspired enough to write. I don't have any new ideas. It's just not coming from within. These are the general, things that people say when they have a writer's block. I personally feel just sit in an environment in which you're most comfortable, whether it's near your bookshelf, it's your drawing room, it's your bedroom, it's on the carpet that you like, whether you like yellow lights around or whatever. Just create that environment for yourself. Pick up a pen and a diary and write. Okay, what is the worst thing that can happen? It will not turn out to be good. You'll write something bad, you'll write something terrible, but there is always an option to go back to it and turn it into something more beautiful. Okay, people undervalue the power of editing. Okay, do not fear writing bad just because you're not getting something from within. It's not going to happen half of the time. I am in this industry. I have to write every day. I have to read every day because my job demands it. I can't even afford to not write even a single day. Now, what do people like me do? How do we feel inspired? Okay, so we create that environment. Sometimes I read books that I really like to get inspired. Sometimes, if even that doesn't help, I take up new books and read those to get inspired. Sometimes I watch something interesting on Netflix or Amazon, some interesting storyline to get inspired. Sometimes I try to change my usual writing style and experiment to write down something and block and to get away from the writer's block. And lastly, sometimes I just sit down and I start writing without fear writing bad. So these are just a few things that I can tell you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Kavya, for patiently answering everyone's questions. I know there are a lot of people still have questions, and as we said, it's one is only so much. But I think we've gone through an entire journey of understanding how to start with different forms, and I think it was beautifully explained. I'm quite excited to get back to paper and pen. And I think all of y'all should do that. Is sort of now use what Kavya has explained, what has she taught us, and use it to emote, to write. Like we said, the reason why we're having this, and we've always believed that writing is important, is because we're able to emote ourselves and be able to get that outlet, right? So today the world is going crazy, like Kavya said, stay at home. We're all at home, and you can journey through your words, you can journey through your writing. So do try to make it. Don't feel afraid to write. It's for you first, and then someone else. So write for yourself. Like I said, y'all have been with us for long. You'll know that I've been writing. Enlightened Sapiens was started 2.5 years ago in a book, right? And that's how beautiful things can come out by writing. So don't limit what you write. Don't limit. Use the free verse technique of poetry that, like Kavya said, and use the different tools that she gave you. So I'm going to share some details because I know a lot of you asked for it. Give me a minute. All right. So like y'all know, we are on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Y'all can just find us anywhere at Enlightened Sapiens. Kavya is at _Kavya Sharma. You can follow both of us. And of course, share your doubts if you have any with her and us. so that we can, of course, get to it. So you can share it with us. And we also have our email. So if you'd like to get in touch with us to, like we were saying, to write for us, we have a beautiful blog section, which we call Thoughts. We don't call it the blog, we call it Thoughts. So it's sort of a knowledge pool of people's experiences. And it includes articles, poetries, anything that is positive and helping one another. That's what we are all about. So you can email us, you can take a screenshot of this, you can follow us, of course, and reach out to us on Instagram. And yeah, would love to stay connected. We have a lot of upcoming sessions. Simple stuff. We've got next month, we're practicing classical yoga and pranayama and meditation, that's breathing. We have another writing session on creative writing and storytelling, that's on 22nd May. As well as connecting with your inner tutor, sort of how to be more confident, how to understand your instincts. So these are the different things we're doing on meditation, fitness, breathing, writing, gardening, art, a lot of sessions. You can find all of them on our website, enlightenedsapiens.com/upcoming events, or easiest on our Instagram profile, which you'll already know. And I've said this before, that we are all a community. So if you feel that you would like to contribute to this community, please reach out. Do not feel, that, oh, what skill do I have, or someone else. If you feel that someone would be aligned, would be great to hold a session, someone would be have their skills in graphic designing, video editing, social media, technology. The idea is we can use each other's resources to create something beautiful and impact someone beautifully. So today's session, as it was free, it's of course taken a lot of efforts by a lot of people who've given their time, efforts to be part of it. So if you feel like you'd like to be part of it, just reach out to us on our Instagram or email, and we'd love to have you part of the team. And yes, for those of you who, so many of you who wrote your Instagram handles and your poems, and you'd like to share it, we would love to share it with us. We are promoting reading and writing, so love to share it. We give you all an author page, we give you a description. It's all of that so that you can be more confident to write, and which would help you be happy or help spread happiness to other people, or enable other people to be motivated to write. So that's what we're doing, standing on each other's shoulders. So you can share your articles, poem with us. We have a thought section on our website. You can go check it out, and just reach out to us on email or on Instagram. So just wanted to say thank you once again to Kavya for this really, really beautiful, empowering session. I really do hope we get to do a lot more with you. You can check out her work, her books, and love to have you back, Kavya. And thank you again for taking the time out. And all of you here who so patiently sat, I know we've gone 10 minutes over time, but patiently sat with us till the end. We'd love to see you all very, very soon. And spread some positivity, stay safe, stay indoors, and yes, be happy.
Lovely. Thank you for having me. It was a beautiful thing to do, and I hope you all have a nice day ahead and be safe. And if you were not inspired enough to write poetry till now, maybe now you will kickstart and try your hand at poetry. Take care, all of you, and it was lovely meeting you all.
Absolutely. Thank you once again, and I'll see you all very, very soon.